Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So today we're doing something a little bit different. This is a video idea that I've had stewing in my mind now for quite some time. But finally today I'm sitting down to record this because yes, we are going to be exploring some of the different streaming release strategies that we have been seeing as of late. Now, this is something that I usually incorporate into my reviews, especially for streaming shows. But there are definitely trends that I've been noticing in the streaming landscape that I would love to get into independent reviews. And today we are specifically going to be tackling the potential death of the binging model. The binging model that was popularized by Netflix, particularly in 2013 after the release of House of Cards. This was the beginning of it all, when Netflix, entered the realm of original content and just completely knocked out its competition before they even had a chance. But now it seems as though they are distancing themselves from the model that made them so popular and famous all those years ago. But it seems as though they're not even the only ones, because other streaming services have not even tried to use the binging model for their release strategies for TV shows, and in fact have instead gone down a different, more traditional route. So we're going to be talking about all of that good stuff today, and if you guys have any thoughts or feelings regarding any of these release strategies, I would of course love to hear them down in the comments below. But before we get into all of that good stuff, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. And also be sure to let me know what other streaming or industry related topics you would like me to cover on my channel. I'm definitely interested in doing more of these videos in the future, and especially to do with streaming, because I do have a streaming wars playlist on my channel that I haven't updated in a while, so this will be going in there as an update to that playlist, and hopefully I'll be able to fill it up with even more videos tackling these interesting topics. But without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on the death of the binging era. So first of all, we need to address, what is binging? Well, most of us will know this, but binging is essentially when you have a streaming service or a network drop all of the episodes of a season at once, whether it be, on Friday so that everyone can watch it over the weekend, or perhaps on another day, although I don't know why you would do that. Typically speaking, Netflix tends to drop all of the episodes in a season on a Friday. So like I said, you can catch up with the episodes over the weekend. And they popularized this model back in 2013 with their first major original series, House of Cards. And then they continued on with shows like Orange is the New Black before moving on to extremely popular shows like Stranger Things, The Umbrella Academy, and more recently with Squid Game and Bridgerton. Now, of course, traditionally when it came to TV show releases, we saw weekly releases where one episode will be released every week. And this was something that was started back in the 1950s with the whole dawn of television to begin with. So it has been a release strategy that has been favored by networks for a very, very long time now. And it seems as though we are going back to that direction as of late. Now, this is the part where I inject my personal feelings and emotions towards this whole thing. I, for one, am not the biggest fan of the weekly release schedule. I, for one, am not the biggest fan of the weekly release schedule. We're going to be going through the reason why and the disadvantages of this release strategy later down the line. But first of all, let's acknowledge, let's shine a spotlight onto some of the positives, the advantages of the weekly release schedule. First one up we have is the water cooler TV series, the revival of the water cooler TV series. Because one of the main criticisms when it came to the binge model is that it brought about the death of the water cooler TV show. Now, for those of you who don't know, a water cooler TV show is essentially a big TV series that is super popular. It's really reached a peak in the pop culture zeitgeist and everyone is checking it out, so much so that people go into the office on Monday and they stand by the water cooler and talk about it. And oftentimes people say the last great water cooler show was actually Game of Thrones. Was actually Game of Thrones. Guys, I'm still suffering from the trauma of season 7, okay? Let's not even get into that. But that's essentially what it is. It's a show that has surpassed just individual viewing and has become a part of pop culture, or in fact, even culture at large, to the point where everyone is tuning in on a specific day at a specific time to watch this series and then go talk about it with their colleagues and their friends the next day at work. Now, I think there are numerous reasons why we've potentially seen the end or the death of the water cooler show, and I don't think that the binge model has everything to do with it. There are other reasons out there, okay, but I will concede that the binge model does have a little bit to do with it. Because with the binge model, you do have these, you know, really enthusiastic fans of a TV series like myself who will sit there and watch the entire 10 episodes of a season. But then you have some other fans of the series who aren't quite as enthusiastic. They're not quite as die-hard, okay? So they want to take their time with the show. But what happens is you have some of us, okay, who have binge watched the entirety of the season, and we're coming into work on Monday ready to talk about what happened in episode 10 with that bombastic finale, and then other people are like, oh my god, please don't say it too loud, like no spoilers, because I haven't reached, you know, episode 10, I'm only on episode 2, which, by the way, for shame, by the way, that's not my fault, for shame. What do you mean you've only reached episode 2? That's embarrassing. But that does create this issue of, you know, a bit of a gap between people who are willing to sit there and binge watch an entire series versus people who, you know, have a life who may have things to do, kids and whatever, and they don't get a chance to watch the whole show because now you can't have that water cooler moment. Whereas when you do release the episodes on a weekly basis, everyone's forced to take in the show morsel by morsel, episode by episode, and so you're all pretty much on the same level, or if you're not, you have the opportunity to catch up reasonably easily. And that leads to the second benefit of the weekly release schedule, and that is that you allow the series to build up hype over time by good word of mouth, because series that are released just, you know, all at once using the binge model only have that one weekend. Like, that is their time to shine. They only have that one weekend to capture a huge audience's attention, and Netflix oftentimes will push this. They will push that show, shove it down your throat the weekend that it is due to come out, but then afterwards it's like blink and you'll miss it. Afterwards it's just dusted under the carpet. It just completely disappears. You know, it gets lost in Netflix's massive content library where it will never be found again unless you actively search for it. Whereas with a weekly release, you can allow the series to gain popularity as it airs. People start to talk about it a bit more, you know, share their thoughts on the show with their friends, who then become convinced to check out the series. And especially when you don't have a ton of episodes that have already aired, like say you're on episode 4 that week, you know, friends might be more likely to join in at episode 4 rather than having to catch up with all 10 episodes of the season that dropped last weekend. It might feel like, well, it's already dropped last weekend, there's no point in me checking this series out now because it would have been old news by the time that I actually get a chance to watch it. And of course, if a series is able to grow an audience as it airs on a weekly basis, that is a great sign for the creators, for the showrunner, because it's likely that their show will be picked up again for a second season or another season. Whereas if you have a show that bombs because of the binge model and because it doesn't have a chance to garner an audience after its initial flop, you know, after it being disappointing in the first weekend, then that's pretty much it. Like, there are no second chances in that case unless it gets discovered magically, you know, months later, which is very unlikely because there is constant content being put on the platform, so it's very easy to be lost in there. So overall, I would definitely say that the weekly release schedule has its benefits. You know, it's no wonder why a lot of streaming platforms are favoring it over Netflix's previously incredibly popular binge model. And the benefits that I've mentioned as of yet were largely to do with the audience and the filmmakers, but of course there's a monetary benefit to weekly release strategies as well. And this is often the benefit that I point out in my reviews of various shows or movies, and that is the churn, the threat of churn. So for those of you guys who don't know, churn is basically when you have a streaming service or a subscription service in general, and you decide to just tune in for the one thing that you like, the one thing that you want, okay, and then promptly unsubscribe when you no longer have to stick around for that one thing that you're interested in. That is called churning. That is the term that the industry have dubbed for this practice that many people have been doing for many years for different things that you subscribe to. But in the case of streaming, that is the streamer's worst nightmare, because they want you to be subscribed all year round for everything. It's kind of like the gym model where you convince yourself you're going to go to the gym. You subscribe to the gym, you convince yourself you're going to go, and then every single month the same amount of money comes out regardless of whether you go to the gym, you step foot in there or not. And at the same time, you just feel obliged to keep paying even though you're not utilizing that subscription. It's the same thing. Streamers want you to feel trapped in the nicest way possible with their subscription. They want you to stay on board all year round so they can squeeze out as much capital from you as possible, especially in this current landscape where there is so much more competition, especially for the OGs like Netflix, who had no competition back in 2013 and now finds itself in a constant war, a constant battle against the streaming services that keep popping up left, right and center every single day. And speaking of these new streamers that are popping up left, right and center, it is especially important for them to keep the churn rates low, because they don't tend to have the huge content libraries that the likes of Netflix and even Disney and Amazon Prime does. So they're heavily reliant on the new content that they're putting out to not only incentivize existing subscribers to remain subscribed, but also get growth, you know, also actually grow as a platform and get new subscribers. And that's where the weekly release schedule can be incredibly beneficial, because then you get basically more for your money with a TV show, instead of just dropping it all at once over one weekend, where after that weekend it would have been yesterday's news and no one will be bothered anymore. And also people would have already watched the entire season, and if they wanted to unsubscribe they could do so with nothing stopping them. With a weekly release schedule you get more mileage out of that show, because now if I want to watch, you know, Only Murders in the Building, I have to wait a good full, how many episodes was that show? Like 8 episodes. So I have to wait a good full 8 weeks, which is 2 months worth of subscription money until the finale of that series to unsubscribe should I want to. And even then, by the time we reach the finale of the show, there would have been other stuff, you know, other amazing content that would draw me in and force me to want to remain subscribed to the streaming service. So the weekly release schedule definitely has benefits for audiences, for filmmakers and TV show runners, but also for these streaming companies, for these streamers. It is very financially beneficial. Okay, so now let's get into some of the disadvantages of the weekly release schedule. Let's get into some of the reasons why I don't think binging will be disappearing entirely anytime soon. So first one up is the one that applies to me the most, if I'm being honest. It's the one that encapsulates my feelings on this whole subject matter the most, if I'm being honest, okay? And it's that younger people do not have the patience to wait every single week for a new episode. We don't. We really do. I'm so sorry, but we really don't, okay? And that's one of the main reasons why Netflix started the binging model to begin with, because they done their consumer research, and it had found that younger people just do not have the patience to wait every single week for a new episode. Now, we will do it if we have to and if we're really invested in a show, but it also could be a huge disadvantage to the series if it finds that the viewership is actually going down as the weeks are going on, because people just don't care enough, like they're just not engaged enough to wait every week for a new episode. And I mean, that's what was happening with traditional television to begin with, right? Let's not forget. That's what's happening with traditional network TV. So of course it can be expected that the similar thing would be happening to streaming shows, because some people just do not care enough to wait an entire 10 weeks to see how a show ends. So I do think that it can play as a disadvantage having that weekly release schedule, especially for younger generations who aren't used to now having to wait an entire 8 to 10 weeks for a show to wrap up, because we're used to having that whole dump during the binging model days of an entire season being quickly consumed over the weekend. And speaking of super quick consumption of media, of course, we're living in the TikTok age. We're living in the TikTok age where people's attention spans are like 2 seconds. If you're still watching this video, congrats. If you're still watching this super long, by today's standards, video, congratulations to you, okay? Because we're living in a whole new digital era where you can tell a story in a matter of literal seconds, and anything over 5 minutes is considered long. It's considered long and tedious. So the idea of having to wait 10 weeks, the idea of having to wait 10 weeks for one season of television could literally make me tear my hair out from its roots. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like, it is just not the same as it used to be. The landscape for television and film and just media in general has changed drastically and rapidly in these past few decades. So I think it's expected that, you know, the weekly release schedule isn't going to quite work in the same way that it did like 70 years ago when it was first introduced with the dawn of television. And I do think that people's patience or lack thereof definitely plays a role in that. Now, another disadvantage of the weekly release schedule is kind of the flip side of the advantage, where you could grow an audience over the weeks that the episodes are released. And that is that, what if you don't grow an audience? And in fact, what if the audience goes down because word of mouth and the reception of the series isn't positive? What if everyone hates the show, basically? What if everyone hates your show and they're going around saying that this show or this season of the show is terrible? What then? You're stuck with this show for a good, 8 weeks. You have to see it through. And in the meantime, perhaps you don't have any, other major content because you've cleared the way for that series, or because you're a newer streaming service and you don't have much new content to offer to audiences should this one fail. And so you're just kind of stuck in that instance. We've seen a couple of examples of this, most recently with Disney Plus and the Book of Boba Fett. Like, I don't know if you knew this, but the Book of Boba Fett was kind of mixed to negatively received series. And unfortunately, because again, Disney Plus is a newer streaming service, it doesn't have the huge kind of backlog of original content that Netflix does, nor does it have this well-oiled machine that's just constantly pumping out original content that everyone is interested in left, right, and center, the way that Netflix does. So it was heavily reliant on this new Star Wars thing, the shiny new Star Wars thing, to bring in new subscribers as well as maintaining the existing subscribers. But unfortunately, the show didn't really live up to people's expectations. It certainly didn't live up to the high standards set by its sister show, The Mandalorian, and as a result, viewership dropped on that series, and I can't imagine it attracted many new viewers. So in that instance, the weekly release schedule didn't help, because instead of waiting for the next episode every week out of anticipation and excitement, those who bothered to wait the weeks following were just waiting to see if the show would get better. And that's one way that the binge model is advantageous, because if you are a streaming service and you have this new show that you pour a lot of money and effort and marketing into, but it ends up being a flop, you can still kind of dust it under the carpet because the next week you'll have a shiny new toy for audiences to get excited about, and it means that there won't be mass unsubscriptions for the entirety of the month. And also, another defense for the binge model is that it still works. It still works. Like, we are still seeing TV shows break through the cacophony of new content to actually have a cultural impact. Shows like Bridgerton, shows like Squid Game, like Inventing Anna, they were all all dropped at once over a weekend, but they still garnered audiences as the weeks went on. They still grew in popularity because of good word of mouth. And so Netflix has essentially been able to have their cake and eat it too. They've been able to drop the entirety of a series on one day and have that be a huge weekend for that show, but also the show hasn't just disappeared into the abyss that is the Netflix content gallery, because it's managed to grow an audience as time has gone on, meaning that more people are subscribing or staying subscribed to the streaming platform. And also good word of mouth means that people are likely to want to see more from that show or more from that production team or showrunner, which means more seasons and more perhaps spin-offs of the series and more content from Netflix, which is good for the creator side of things as well. So all around, the binging model can be super beneficial for not only audiences but also filmmakers and showrunners, and of course the streaming platforms themselves. So considering all of the benefits and drawbacks of the weekly release schedule and the binge model, what are we expecting to see from streaming services when it comes to the release models that they use for their TV shows in the future? This leads me to my thoughts on the hybrid models that we have been seeing emerge from these streaming services. Now, the first hybrid model that I've been seeing quite a bit is when a series is released in parts. We've seen this especially on Netflix with shows like Lucifer, Money Heist, Ozark, and now Stranger Things as well is going to be released in a couple of parts. It's essentially where they have like the first 5 or so episodes of the season, usually the last season notably, and that's released all at once using the binge model that Netflix has become very well known for. But then you have the second part of the series be released months later. Now, I don't know if this is a result of pandemic issues or what, but I do think that a happy side effect, at least from Netflix's eyes, is that you will want to stay subscribed until, or at least on the month of the release of the second part of the season. So either you'll be subscribed the entire time, or you will hop on again to Netflix to tune in to the second part of the season, which I think again is financially beneficial to them, and I see why they will go down that route. And then you have the second hybrid method, which is dropping a couple or a few episodes at once and then having the weekly release strategy for a TV show. And notably, we saw this with The Boys season 2, not season 1, because season 1 was dropped using the binge model where we got all of the episodes at once. But with season 2, we saw Amazon dropping the first 3 episodes all at once and then making us wait a subsequent 5 weeks or so to see the entirety of the season using the weekly release schedule. So again, they're hybrid models. They're making use of the benefits of both kinds of release strategies in order to kind of maximize their effects, you know, trying to tackle the drawbacks of the binge model, but also gaining benefits of the weekly release schedule as well. And I would say that if the binge model is dying, if we are ultimately seeing the end of the binging era, I would prefer going down the hybrid way 100%. I don't think I'm ready for the strictly weekly release schedule. I've been spoiled by Netflix, okay? The damage has already been done. So yes, I do protest highly and mightily to the traditional weekly release schedule, and I would absolutely prefer to see the hybrid model take over if I have no other say in the matter. But that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on these TV show release strategies, it's time for you guys to let me know what you think on this matter down in the comments below, and also let me know what other streaming wars topics you'd like me to cover on my channel. I'd love to hear them. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.